Greetings, my fellow beings. My name is Amanda, and today we are going to be learning about Tourette Syndrome. And today I'm going to be interviewing my older brother who has Tourette Syndrome to get a little bit more insight into what life is like with Tourette Syndrome. Since I personally do not have Tourette Syndrome, I thought it would be good to ask someone that actually has it so that we can get the right information. And it's good to have a first-person point of view when it comes to these kind of illnesses. So first of all, I wanted to talk about what Tourette Syndrome is. Tourette Syndrome is a condition of the nervous system that causes tics. Tics are sudden twitches, movements, or sounds that people do involuntarily and repeatedly. People who have tics cannot stop their tics from happening. It's like having the hiccups. You may want to stop your hiccups and you don't want to have hiccups, but it's going to happen no matter what. Or if you really, really need to sneeze, it's going to happen no matter what. You can stop it or put it into the background for a little bit, but it's going to happen eventually, which is what a lot of people describe Tourette's like, is that it's like the hiccups or like a sneeze, where you cannot stop it from happening. There are two types of tics. There are motor tics and there are vocal tics. Motor tics are movements of the body. For example, this can be things like shrugging, blinking, or jerking your arm. The second type is vocal tics. Now, vocal tics are things like humming, clearing one's throat, or repeating a phrase over and over again, or yelling out a word or phrase. The other thing about tics is that they can be simple or complex. Simple tics involve moving small amounts of the body. For example, that can be things like squinting your eyes or sniffing. Then complex tics use several parts of the body. And examples of this can be things like bobbing your head, jerking your arm, and then jumping up all at the same time. That could be a complex tic. Now, the main symptoms of Tourette syndrome is the tics that come with Tourette syndrome, and they start between the ages of 5 and 10 years old. And they start off usually as motor tics, and they start off in the neck and shoulders, and that's usually where they start. And the thing about tics is that they get worse when you are stressed, have a lot of anxiety, or if you're super excited about something. And they tend to get better when a person is calm or focused or paying attention to something else. It's not a stagnant condition. You're going to have a lot of changes throughout your life, and it could get worse, it could get better. It just depends on the individual. And even though a lot of these conditions can disappear and reappear, it is still considered a chronic illness. When it comes to diagnosing Tourette syndrome, there is no blood test that you can take in order to find out whether or not you have Tourette syndrome. Healthcare providers generally watch what the person is doing, look at their symptoms, and they diagnose it depending on what the condition is showing at that time. And tic disorders vary depending on person to person, and so it's going to take some investigation to find out whether or not you have Tourette syndrome. So they're going to look at things like the tics that are present, like motor or vocal, how long they have been going on, the severity of your symptoms, things like that, and that's what they're going to look at in order to diagnose whether or not you have Tourette syndrome. And the other thing is that the thing that they're looking for is whether or not a tic has been present for over a year before they start diagnosing you with Tourette syndrome. There is no cure for Tourette syndrome, and most people with Tourette syndrome have very mild cases, and so they don't need treatment, and so they just go on with their life without having any medical treatment. But for those with severe Tourette syndrome, medical treatment is available, such as medication and behavioral therapies. Especially if your tics cause injury, if they cause pain, if they cause interference with school, with work, or your social life, or if they just generally cause a lot of stress, then there are medical treatments available for you. All right, that is an overview, a very broad overview of what Tourette syndrome is, and now we're going to interview my older brother. And you're going to notice that when I am talking to him, I say that I haven't known him very long, because he was adopted when he was a baby, and we found each other, our families found each other when about 7 years ago. And so we are now a family all together, and we get along fantastically, and that's what we're talking about when I say when I first met you type thing. So that's what that whole thing is about. It's a fantastic story, and definitely for a different time. So there's that. Anyway, I hope that you enjoy this interview. All right, so I'm here with my older brother, Chris, and we are going to be talking about Tourette's today. And so I have my list of questions, and don't mind the fact that we have green all over our mouths.
It's our little brother's birthday, so
yes, and he had grass-colored cake, so we have nice green tongues. All right, so I'm going to start off by asking you some questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so my very first one is, can you remember the first time you realized that you didn't behave like everybody else?
As long as I can remember. Is the easiest answer I can give you. Yeah.
Pretty much?
Yeah. I mean, it was elementary school. It was that time of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And just the odd things that I would do, like walking down the on the pavement or whatever, the blacktop, you know. And I had this thing where I would have to every once in a while, I had this incredible, it's more than just an urge, like it's almost like you have to do it, where I would have to bend down, touch the ground, jump up, clap, and grunt at the same time. That's when I was like, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you find is the biggest challenge living with Tourette's?
I don't really find that there's that big of a challenge. I'm kind of the person who's like, you know, most of how we deal with it is mental. And so, you know, with Tourette's, it's subtle, which I know that we'll get into a question where I'll explain a little bit more, but yeah, it really doesn't inhibit me, even as an entertainer. You would think, you know, with Tourette's, but yeah, no.
Anyway,
name that movie.
If you didn't know, we didn't meet each other until, how long has it been now?
7 years?
7 years?
Something like that?
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So, when I first met you, I had no idea that you had Tourette's at all. And you were telling me that you did it. I thought you were doing another joke. I was like, no, you don't.
Well, let me explain why you thought I was telling another joke. Because when Mom asked what my dad did for a living, I told them that he collected, dead ants? And he would make little sculptures out of dead ants. And they thought I was serious, so...
And we were trying so hard, we're like, oh!
And then I was like, nah, he's a school teacher.
Yeah, so, you know, I thought you were joking that entire time. So, all right, so how would you describe how your tics feel?
Necessary, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like sometimes I'm not even aware of them, and they get more prominent when I'm stressed or tired. But sometimes they're just tiring. Like I can't stop. Like it's, you know, my tics are this. You want me to explain my tics? So the ones that I know that I do a lot are that, which used to be louder, but over the years they've kind of muted.
Okay.
That right there, that, you know, it's always like sticking my tongue out even partially, and that right there, that's a big one right there. And so sometimes they're exhausting because I'm so tired and so stressed, and then they really come on, and it's like I don't want to be doing them, but they're constantly happening. And it's tiring. It can be very tiring. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that for me, there's been a few medications that have brought on Tourette's-like symptoms. And I remember calling my doctor, and I was like, I have to move my leg, and I have to do this. And he's like, all right, stop taking the medication right now. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Oh. So whenever someone talks about Tourette's, I'm like, I have like the teeny tiniest, itty bitty understanding of what it's like to, like, you have to do said thing. Obviously, I don't have Tourette's, so I don't know fully, but I have that teeny tiny little understanding of what it's like to have to move or have to do.
Totally.
And so it's not something that I would like.
It's, you know, I've gotten so used to it. But like I said, it can get tiring.
I believe that, yeah. Do you think that your tics are influenced by or affect your personality?
That's a good question. I read that before and went, that's a really good question. Influenced by my personality or influence my personality? I would say more the latter.
Okay.
Because as a kid, growing up short and squatty, I guess is the best way to say it, and then having Tourette's and OCD as well, and ADHD, which is one of the wonderful things. They say that, well, this is what's cool. They say that Mozart probably had Tourette's because he also had OCD. Almost always accompanies Tourette's and also ADHD. It's usually those things get kind of clumped together.
Yeah.
So, but growing up with those things and having a lot of the kids, I was bullied quite a bit, and let me define bullying, because I think a lot of times we go, I was bullied, but I think some people go, oh, you were insulted a few times. It's not really bullying, but and not woe is me, but a lot of the kids I was beaten up, pushed around and called names and things like that. But then I learned so to answer your question, through those things, it really helped to sculpt my comedy and my comedic, because at first it became a way of survival, So I guess I would definitely say that it really does influence my personality, dealing with it in a lighthearted manner, because the alternative of levity is a world that I've visited before and don't really like, and that's being too negative on myself or too negative about life and things like that, and it's no fun for myself or anyone. So, but anyway, does that make sense? It really has influenced my life and then turned into a career, which is really cool. So yeah.
And I have to say that with any kind of illness, if you don't find the humor in it, then it can get very depressing very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think people don't know how to react when you are joking around and stuff, and they're like, why are you laughing right now? And you're like, because if I'm not, then I would be crying right now, and I would rather be laughing right now.
Totally. And there's a whole thing on comedy and tragedy. There's a whole different podcast. Comedy and tragedy are in the same veins, and comedy oftentimes comes from very tough circumstances, Yep. So, but anyway,
Agreed. What do you think would be one thing that would make living with Tourette's easier, especially for others who have it?
I think okay. So let me give an example. I remember when I was young, I was staying at my aunt and uncle's house, and we were during a prayer. I couldn't stay still, and I remember my uncle saying, "Why couldn't you?" And he, bless him, but he was very mean. Is a word. Okay. I'll say that. But I'm not going to name who it was. Okay. So, and he goes, he says, "Why couldn't you stay still during the prayer?" And I said, "Because I have Tourette's." And he goes, "You don't have Tourette's." And so I think a lot of it is this mentality that either you have created it yourself or you're making yourself do it, or that it doesn't exist. And I think I think we've changed a lot with mental health over the years. We still have a long way to go. But I think if people really understood Tourette's, and any illness, any mental illness or anything like that, or I don't even say illness, I'm going to say any mental malady or, yeah. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. There's a lady that I watch on TikTok that she has Tourette's, and one of the biggest comments that people make is, "You're making this up.
Yeah.
This isn't real."
Yeah.
And hers is pretty severe, and so I could.
It might be the same. Maybe the same lady I'm thinking of too.
Does she have green tipped hair?
Yeah.
So, and that's like the number one thing is like, you're faking this. This isn't real. Tourette's isn't a real state, and so I can understand people just not thinking that it's real, which is dumb. Don't think that.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I just really don't want to live with it. And if I had the choice, I wouldn't. But it does. But it's the lot that I was given, and it's part of who I am still. Anyway, yeah.
How did your parents or family react to your diagnosis?
Very understanding. I think it was like, oh, okay. Our son, now that we can define it, it's not that he's just weird. Just kidding. But that they were like, okay, there's a reason why he's doing these things. It's not that he's like, I'm sure it was a little annoying. I know it was. One of my other, this is a big one, and then a clap. And I don't do that one as often. That one comes out when I'm really tired or really bored. But and that one would drive my dad nuts because, boom, and it was loud, and he'd be like, "Geez, Christian, must you?" Yeah. I think is what he would say. Must you? Yeah, sorry, Dad. But when it was diagnosed, they were really very understanding, very, very supportive. I mean, I was at the doctor's, weekly. I remember, dealing with that, with depression as well and things like that. So, they were very, very understanding, very supportive. And I remember the time that my dad finally went, I think we need to do something about this, was we were on a Sunday walk to give my mom a break. And so my dad took us out, us kids, and we were walking, and I was doing that thing where I, walk, bend over, boom. And he had never really seen that because I hadn't really walked with my dad up until that point. And he was like, "Why do you do that, Christian?" I go, "I don't know. And he was like, "Oh." And his first degree's in psychology. So that's when he was like, "I think we need," okay. So he and my mom talked, and then they were like, "Yeah, let's go see a doctor, a specialist on this." And that's, anyway.
Awesome.
Yeah.
At least he recognized that he needed
to be
seen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and he was big on mental health, did not have that negative stigma with mental health.
Good.
Of like, yeah, if you have a broken arm, you get a cast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So this goes into something else you were talking about earlier, but what was your experience with school life?
Very interesting. Very interesting. A lot of them were like, my Tourette's are very muted, and that's a misconception. I think you have a question on that too. But so I'll get to that when you get to that point. But it wasn't too bad. I think once I got into high school and was known as the funny kid, because my mom put me in theater in 8th grade against my will, because I went, I don't want to do that. I like girls. And no offense to anyone, I'm just saying. So, but that was the stigma that but I was known as the funny guy, and so people by that point in high school, after I'd been diagnosed and everything, people already knew me as the funny guy, because I had used it as a means of survival. Yeah. So it actually worked in my benefit. Towards my benefit, it worked to my benefit. Yes, there we go. That's the word. And I did theater and all that stuff. And the interesting thing about Tourette's, and I have a friend who also has Tourette's, and he's got the more severe case of Tourette's, which we'll talk about that here in a sec. But he's also, I don't think he'd mind if I talked about it. No, he wouldn't. Tanner Gilman, who's on Studio C and a bunch of other things, and he has a more severe, type of Tourette's than I have. He's got this, the swearing and the da-da-da. But we talk about this, he and I, and what's interesting is when I did plays and when I still do plays or when I'm on set for a film or a commercial or this or that, my Tourette's don't affect me when I'm on stage or when the camera's rolling. And then once I'm off stage or the director says cut, then my Tourette's, it's like, okay, got him out, Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, but while I did theater in high school, that's when I first recognized too that, yeah, when I'm on stage, it's not really, it's there, but it's not. It's so weird.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is an argument to people saying, well, then it's just in your head. Or is it? But then, like I said, when I would come off stage, it was like the release, the pent-up release of like, I got to get all the tics out.
But I think with anything that is mental, you can block it for a certain amount of time, and then it's going to come back.
Right.
And so even if it is what they consider only mental, it's still there.
Right.
You're just pushing it back for a little bit of time.
It's always there. But yeah.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about Tourette's?
Boom. Okay, so this is to answer the question. So, whenever people think of Tourette's, they think of the most extreme case, right? And that's your swearing and when I was a counselor, with youth, with at-risk youth, and one of my boys had the severe case, and I remember, and it was so cute, I guess is the word. He'd always be like, "Hey Christian, how you doing?" And he would let out this litany of swear words, and then he'd be like, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Dude, I have Tourette's, I get it." So, but I think that's the biggest misconception is that Tourette's, whenever people think of it, they go to the most extreme case, and not the small, the minute. Well, I would say for other people looking in, it looks small. Facial tics, head tics, vocal tics that I have, like that right there, which to me seem really big, but a lot of people don't. They go, "You have Tourette's?" And I go, "Yeah," and they go, "But I never." I go, "Yeah, because I've kind of built, again, my personality around the fact, like, it almost sounds like maybe I'm clearing my throat or whatever the tics is there." But yeah, I think that's the biggest misconception, that there's a range of Tourette's from this range to this range. And even though mine's not as severe as others, it's a daily thing dealing with Tourette's. So, yeah.
And I think for me, when I first met you and I didn't know that you had Tourette's, I'm so used to everyone else in my family moving constantly.
Yeah.
Like, because we all have ADHD, and so everybody's moving. And so when you were doing your tics, I was just like, well,
it's
just moving.
Yeah, just moving.
Okay, and then when you said you had Tourette's, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now that makes sense. Now I can see it. But up until that point, I had no clue.
And most people don't. In fact, there was a girl I took on a date when I was in college, and bless her heart, such a sweetheart. We're still friends to this day. But we went out, and she goes, "Do you have Tourette's?" And I go, "How'd you know?" She goes, "I have a sister with Tourette's." She says, I could tell. And if you have Tourette's, you can recognize Tourette's in other people, even when they're muted like mine. Yeah. Like I did the same thing with a buddy of mine who's another comedian. And we were at lunch, the first time I ever had lunch with him. And I didn't know this. I'd only seen him on screen. And never had any, tics or anything on screen. And I was just like, "Tom, do you have Tourette's?" And he goes, "Yeah." I think he was put off a little bit maybe. And I go, "I have Tourette's." And he goes, "Oh," and then he could see it in me, but yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Human body is fascinating.
It is.
So, Eric says that I need to rephrase this question.
Okay.
But being the focused high achiever that you are, what other wishes or dreams or goals do you still want to achieve? So I guess the question that I want is that even though you have Tourette's and you've done so much with your life already, do you think that it holds you back in any way of achieving more goals?
No.
Okay.
Nope. And I'm well on my way to achieving the goals that I had as a kid with the, I can't say it, but with the big fantasy series that I'm producing. I've always wanted to create big motion pictures or TV shows that were seen by the world, and that's about to happen. So, but no, I don't think it holds me back at all. I think if I were to get held back, it would be myself that was holding me back, and not my Tourette's. It'd be me self-talking myself into saying, "Oh, you can't do it because of this or that or whatever." But I think because of having Tourette's and ADHD and depression, these wonderful neurological things, of saying, I think it also drives me, of saying, the world says that, or other people with, these maladies that, say, "I don't know, it's not, and for me it's like, well, I'm not going to, screw that, I'm not going to, I'll show you.
Yeah. So the most important question that I think for this episode is, what advice would you give to a young person with Tourette's who is approaching adulthood?
I would say to someone who has Tourette's I would say to them that you are normal. That just because you have Tourette's, don't look at it as an illness. Don't look at it as it's how your brain works. And that's, and with anyone who has any sort of mental. And again, I hate the word disorder even, which I mean it is, but just that don't let anyone tell you that you're any less of a person, of a human being, because your mind works differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, did they hit a special chord?
Yes.
Good. No, that's what I would say though. Yeah, seriously, I would say that don't let anything hold you back.
Right.
Your biggest enemy is you. And don't look at yourself and think, I don't know anyone who's done this who has Tourette's. I don't know anyone who's accomplished this who has Tourette's. Mm-hmm. Well, then you be the first one. You be the first one to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'd say.
I love that.
Awesome.
That's perfect. Well, thank you for sitting down with me.
Thanks, Mandy. Amanda.
So thank you for sitting down with me.
You're welcome.
And being willing to come onto my show and talk about Tourette's with me.
Anytime.
And I am a much better person because it forced me to do research that I didn't do before.
Really? What was the biggest thing that you learned from Tourette's that you were like, oh, what was the biggest eye-opener?
That it is in association with OCD and ADHD. I read that on an article.
You didn't know that before?
No,
yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And then also, what the most common tics are vocal humming, sniffing, and neck twitches.
Yep, I got two of those, 2 of the 3.
So
sniffing, not so much.
I had a minor freak out because I'm a sniffer.
Really?
So
you have to at least have, what was it? In order to be diagnosed with Tourette's, you have to have, most people think if I've got certain little tics, but you have to have X amount of tics and X amount of vocal tics.
Okay.
To be officially diagnosed. Like, everyone's like, I want to be officially diagnosed. Yeah.
There was a minor freak out.
You're like, I like to sniff.
Because I sniff all the
like
time.
This?
Yeah. And most of my editing in my videos is me taking out all of my sniffs.
Really?
Yeah. So I was talking to Eric about how much I sniff, and he was like, you do not have Tourette's. And I was like, but what if I do? So.
I think hypochondria runs in the family.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It does.
Yeah,
a lot,
yeah.
actually. So, anyway. So I hope that you learned something new from this, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and maybe it gets you into wanting to do research on other illnesses. Even if you don't have an illness, do research on it so that you become a better person, because you can be much more empathetic to other people if you understand other illnesses that are out there. So if you enjoyed this video or you just want to support this channel, then go ahead and click that subscribe button, and go ahead and click that like button if you did enjoy this video. Remember to be kind. Kindness is free, so give it out to everyone. And I'll see you next time.
Remember kindness!
Thank you, Eric. Yes, remember kindness.
No, I couldn't let that go. I wasn't going to ruin the outro.
Before you even whatnot and words and things, it's really late in the night and I'm tired and words.
Time again.
Okay.
I mean, I'm such a good actor.
Of course, there's Artie right there, so I have to make sure that I get him right there. Perfect.
Wadi McFwadi.
Unfortunately, his eyes are like right on the line. You can't see his
course.
eyes.
Dang. He's like not even moving.
Oh. No, there you go.
You're
There it
both
is.
I wish I could send you
Mr.
Oh, here comes George.
videos.
and George and
Just
Oh,
send
he's
it over
getting closer.
Messenger.
Yes,
No,
that's
but
good.
Can you actually add it?
Marty,
Okay.
you're a special dog.
I'll do a zoom up
Yeah,
of
you
him,
should
and you
just-
can add it on bloopers.
Okay. Which is fine.
Do you want the official Amanda?
Sure. So I can have people call me Amanda. Yeah.
Oh, well, it's called Mandy's Musings.
Amanda's.
Manda's Musings.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just because sometimes you're like, unless you're family or friends, it's Amanda.
It is true.
So I was like,
It's weird when people that aren't my family or friends that were in high school say Mandy, and I'm like, ugh.
ah.
I don't know you. No.
What's same with Chris? Yeah.
You prefer people calling you Christian if they don't know you from a certain time period?
No, but it feels more familiar and familial
Yeah.
when people call me Chris.
Yeah.
Because with my family, with with my family that I grew up with this family,
Mm-hmm.
it feels more familial to be called Chris
Yeah.
than Christian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even though I'm Christian, but yeah.
Yep. I'm.
So am I.
You're.
I'm a Christian. No way.
Let me finish this, and then you guys can joke around. Jeez.
Sorry.
All right. Well, thank you for
I
sitting.
have a funny story about Christian. Like, Christian.
Well, then hold on to it. Let me finish this.